Welcome back to Life's Shalom. My name is Avital, and this week's Parsha is Parshat Miketz. And Parshat Miketz really focuses on the relationship of Joseph and his other brothers. And we know from last week's Parsha that their relationship was not one that was amicable. But what's interesting is this is not the first relationship where there was hatred between brothers that we have seen in the Torah. In fact, there have been several. The very first set of brothers, Cain and Abel, we know that they did not get along, so much so that Cain killed Abel out of jealousy. We had Isaac and Ishmael, and as we know from that story, go back a few weeks, that Abraham sent away Ishmael because he was being a bad influence on Isaac, which did not create a space for good feelings between them. And we had Jacob and Esau. And once again, Esau wanted to kill Jacob. He didn't, but he wanted to kill Jacob because Jacob took his birthright and the blessings from his father. So this sort of hatred between brothers is not something new or unfamiliar to the Parshas. But now here we arrive at Joseph and his brothers. Now, Joseph, there was a total of 12 brothers. Joseph and Benjamin, they were whole brothers, because if you remember, there was 4 mothers between these 12 sons of Jacob. And Benjamin, who was rather young at the time, was not really involved in this, but the 10 other brothers really had negative feelings towards Joseph, as we saw last week, because Joseph was the favorite of their father. And so the brothers, initially, they wanted to kill him. They put him in this pit, and then he ended up being sold to the Ishmaelites and being brought down to Egypt. After this week's Parsha, in subsequent Parshas, we see examples of brothers who get along beautifully. We see Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. We see Moses and Aaron, who had this close working relationship for the rest of the Torah. And we see the sons of Moses. And not only, again, was there not hatred, but there was great camaraderie between them, these sets of brothers. So why is it that the Torah takes the time to focus on the relationships where there was trouble and sorrow? And why is it that this is the last relationship where there's that sort of animosity between the brothers? What shifted? Why do we not continue to see stories? I'm sure that there were brothers who didn't get along after this, but why is this the last story that the Torah chooses to share with us about brothers who didn't get along? So that was the thing that I was thinking about as I read through the Parsha, so now let's get into it. So Parshat Miketz, it picks up with Joseph being in prison in Egypt. And what happens is that one day, Pharaoh has 2 dreams. And his dreams, he can't understand them and he can't interpret them. And he called all of the wise men of Egypt, and nobody's able to interpret it. But if you remember, Joseph had been in prison with the butcher and the baker. And he told them to please remember him when they got out of prison, and they didn't. But at last, finally he was remembered for his ability to interpret dreams. And so he's called upon to Pharaoh. And Joseph is able to correctly interpret Pharaoh's dreams as meaning that there will be 7 years of plenty in Egypt, abundance, so much grain, so much crop, so much produce, followed by these 7 years of famine. And Joseph suggests that Pharaoh should conserve what he has during the 7 years of plenty in order so that during the 7 years of famine, the people won't starve. It'll be sort of a balance between those years. And Pharaoh finds what Joseph said to be good and to be correct. And so Pharaoh takes Joseph out of prison and he makes him second in command over Egypt. So Pharaoh was first in command, Joseph is now second in command over Egypt. Quite a big shift there. And after that, time begins to pass. There's, exactly as Joseph said, 7 years of plenty, and then the 7 years of famine began. And when the famine spreads, it's widespread throughout the world, the Torah tells us, when the famine begins to spread, it does reach the family of Jacob and Joseph's brothers. And Jacob sends his sons, he says, please go down to Egypt, everybody but Benjamin. Benjamin, again, being Joseph's only full brother. Everybody go down to Egypt and bring back grain, bring back food and supplies for the family so that we shouldn't starve. And so the 10 brothers, they go down to Egypt and they have an audience with Joseph, who is in charge. And Joseph immediately recognizes his brothers, But his brothers don't recognize him at all. Again, last they knew he was being sold into slavery. And now there's this much older man, many years have passed, much older man who is second in command over Egypt. Why would they possibly think it's their brother? And so they don't recognize him. So Joseph decides to test his brothers to see if their loyalties have changed. And what he does is he accuses his brothers of being spies. And he says, you told me basically that there were 11 of you, 11 brothers, and that the one was gone, but you only came down as 10. So something doesn't add up here. So what we're going to do, he says, is that one of you, one brother, needs to stay here in Egypt. The other 9 of you will return home with supplies for your family. And once you bring back Benjamin, once you bring back your other brother, you can have whoever stays here in prison back. You can have him back. Brothers can't do anything about it. They don't have any say with the second in command in Egypt. So Shimon stays behind, and the other brothers return to their father. And Jacob really does not want to send Benjamin down to Egypt because it's the son of his beloved wife. His wife is dead. His other son from that wife is gone. And it's his last sort of remaining tie there. He doesn't want to let Benjamin go. But the famine becomes severe enough, and he doesn't really have a choice. And so he does. He sends Benjamin down to Egypt with his other sons. And so the sons, again, they come to Egypt. And this time Joseph decides he wants to test their loyalty specifically to Benjamin, his only full brother. And so what he does, first he feeds them, and he gives them this good meal, and he sends them with supplies. And he tells one of his servants to hide his silver goblet in Benjamin's sack. And so as the 11 brothers are leaving Egypt to return back to their father, to return back to Jacob, Joseph sends his servants after his brothers, and he says, search them for my goblet. And sure enough, they find Joseph's goblet in Benjamin's bag. And so Joseph tells them, why would you do this? And the punishment is going to be that Benjamin, who stole the goblet, he's going to be my servant. And the rest of you, you can go back to your father. I have no qualms with you. It's just the one who stole my goblet that needs to stay here and be my servant. So he's putting them in this position that's very similar to the position he was in, being the one sort of outcast brother. And then we see Judah. Judah comes up. That's sort of where the Parsha ends, first of all. And in next week's Parsha, in Vayigash, a little bit of a spoiler alert into next week, we see Judah, and Judah is coming to talk to Joseph. And here's what he says. When I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, as his soul is attached to his soul, it will come to pass when he sees the boy is gone, he will die, and your servants will have brought down the head of your servant, our father, in grief to the grave. And then he continues, so now please let your servant stay instead of the boy as a slave to my lord, and may the boy go back up with his brothers. So first, there's an acknowledgement that his father, they'd be killing his father in sorrow if Benjamin doesn't return. And second, he's acknowledging that Benjamin has this, again, special place with his father, that Judah, could stay behind, but that if Benjamin stayed behind, it would kill his father, so that Benjamin, again, holds a special place in his father's heart. They're acknowledging his favoritism in a sense. And he's also accepting it, and he's saying, you know what, it's okay. I sort of made a promise to my father that I would look out for Benjamin, and let Benjamin go back, and I will stay in his place, which is such a big shift and such a big change from the brothers trying to sell Joseph into slavery so many years ago. And so what we really see from this story is that the brothers were given this second chance. They were given this opportunity to change, and they did. They changed, and they became better for it. And they learned from the mistake they made so many years ago, and that's what Joseph was looking to see. In Judaism, we have this idea of teshuvah, which is a repentance. And the concept is that when we are, the proper repentance, the true repentance, is when we are put in the same situation or a very similar situation that we were in before and we didn't do so well in the past, we made a mistake. And when we're put in that same situation this time and we make a change and we make a better decision, that's considered to be true repentance. When we are in the same situation and we choose better. And that is what happened with the brothers here. Joseph put them in a similar situation where they could leave behind a brother of Rachel to be a servant, and they didn't do it. They decided to let him go back to his father, and they would stay in his stead. So they truly changed, and they truly, again, with this second opportunity, did something else with that choice. And I think that's the really beautiful lesson in this Parsha, and that is why we see this as the last story of hatred between the brothers, because something changed. They changed. Cain killed Abel. There was no opportunity for them to work it out, to figure it out, to improve. Cain didn't have the opportunity. That was his brother, and he killed his brother, and it's not like, again, he was put in the same situation and got to choose differently. But here, they had the beautiful opportunity to be in the same situation and to improve themselves. And I think that is the lesson for all of us, that when we are given a second chance, that we have the beautiful opportunity to change and to make this shift. Second chances are rare, but they are so beautiful when they come. And we can do that complete teshuvah, that complete change of our ways. And also that we, as Joseph did, should create opportunities for those around us to have a second chance. We shouldn't cut the people off after one chance. We should give them that second chance and allow them to show us that they have changed. Or not, but to allow them the opportunity to change at the very least. And so I think that's a very powerful lesson we can learn from this week's Parsha. I wish you all a wonderful week and a Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to speaking with you next time.